My husband told his friends, "I doubt this joke of a marriage will survive another year. She is nowhere near my level." They laughed proud of him. I smiled and said, "Why wait a year? Let us end it today." Then I walked out. That night his best friend sent a message that made my breath catch. True story. My name is Keisha, and at 32 years old, I built an empire from the shadows while my husband Marcus took all the credit. But sitting in the VIP booth of the Gilded Steer, the most expensive steakhouse in downtown Chicago, I was just a prop, a trophy that wasn't shiny enough for the occasion. Before I tell you how I left him with a $3,000 dinner bill he could not pay, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button, and subscribe if you have ever been the smartest person in the room, but had to play dumb to protect a fragile ego. The air in the private dining room smelled of truffle oil, aged scotch, and arrogance. We were celebrating Marcus' promotion to Director of Marketing at Verified Global. He sat at the head of the table, his chest puffed out in a crisp white Italian dress shirt that I had bought him for his birthday. He was holding a glass of a $600 Cabernet Sauvignon, basking in the adoration of his colleagues and his mother Evelyn. To everyone at this table, Marcus was the golden boy, the genius who had secured the impossible Phoenix Project contract. To me, he was the man who had spent 3 weeks crying in our bathroom because he did not know how to format the proposal. I was the one who stayed up until 4 in the morning for 10 nights straight, ghostwriting his strategy, fixing his financial projections, and practically handing him the promotion on a silver platter. I did it because I loved him. I did it because I thought we were a team. Tonight, however, I was not his partner. I was his punchline. So Keisha, one of Marcus' new subordinates, asked, leaning across the table with a polite but condescending smile, "What is it that you do again?" "Marcus says you help out at home." I opened my mouth to explain that I run a boutique consulting firm that advises Fortune 500 startups on crisis management, but Marcus cut me off before I could speak. "Oh, she dabbles," Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "A little bit of freelance data entry, some virtual assistant work. Mostly she just manages the house. You know how it is. Keisha is not really built for the corporate world. It is too high pressure for her." The table chuckled. I felt a familiar burning sensation in my chest. It wasn't shame, it was rage. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to catch my eye and give me that secret apologetic wink he used to give, but he was too busy preening. His mother Evelyn chimed in from my right. She was wearing a pearl necklace I had paid for when she claimed her pension check was late. She swirled her wine and looked me up and down with a sneer she usually reserved for dirty cutlery. "It is a blessing, really," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Marcus needs someone at home to handle the menial tasks so he can focus on his brilliance. Though I still say, Marcus darling, you should have invited Vanessa tonight. She just made partner at her law firm. Now that is a power couple." Marcus laughed. A loud booming sound that grated on my nerves. "Mom, stop. You are embarrassing Keisha. You know she gets insecure when we talk about real success." I gripped the stem of my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Real success. I had 3 clients who paid me more in a month than Marcus made in a year. My credit score was perfect. His was barely touching 600 because of his secret gambling habits that he thought I didn't know about. I was the one paying the mortgage on our penthouse. I was the one leasing his Range Rover. But to preserve his fragile masculinity, I let him believe his salary covered it all. I let him play the big man. I reached for the salt shaker, my hand trembling slightly from the effort of keeping my mouth shut. My elbow bumped my wine glass. A tiny splash of red wine no bigger than a quarter landed on the white tablecloth. It was a small accident. A nothing moment. But Marcus reacted as if I had set the table on fire. "Jesus, Keisha," he snapped, slamming his hand down. "Can you not be clumsy for one night? This is a $300 shirt." I froze. The entire table went silent. The waiters stopped moving. "It did not even touch you, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "It is on the table." "It is the principal," he sneered, his face twisting into a look of pure disgust. "Look at her. Vague, clumsy, unpolished. Honestly, guys, I doubt this joke of a marriage will survive another year. She is nowhere near my level. The room seemed to tilt. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating. Then slowly his sycophantic colleagues started to laugh. Nervous laughter at first, then louder, fueled by alcohol and the desire to please the new boss. Evelyn cackled, patting Marcus on the arm. "I told you, son," she said, loud enough for the waiters to hear. "You cannot turn a mule into a racehorse. You need someone with pedigree." That was it. That was the moment the camel's back didn't just break, it disintegrated. The love I had held for him, the patience, the years of propping him up, it all evaporated in a single second, leaving behind nothing but cold, hard clarity. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his forehead, the arrogance in his jaw, the weakness in his eyes. He wasn't a king, he was a court jester wearing a crown I had bought him. I did not cry, I did not scream. I felt a strange icy calm wash over me. I slowly stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that cut through their laughter. The table went quiet again, waiting to see if I would run away in tears or make a scene. I looked down at my left hand. On my ring finger sat a 3-carat diamond ring. Marcus told everyone he spent 6 months' salary on it. The truth was, I had wired the jeweler the $50,000 because Marcus' card had been declined at the store, and I didn't want him to feel small in front of the salesperson. I slid the ring off my finger. It felt heavy, cold, and meaningless. Marcus watched me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you doing, Keisha? Sit down. You are making a scene." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who just realized the cage door was open. "You are right, Marcus," I said, my voice clear and projecting to every corner of the room. "Why wait a year? Let us end it today." I held the ring over his glass of $600 Cabernet. I let go. Plop. The heavy diamond hit the wine with a satisfying splash. Red liquid erupted from the glass, spraying across the table and soaking the front of his pristine white Italian shirt. Marcus gasped, jumping back, his eyes bulging. "You crazy witch!" he shouted, grabbing a napkin to dab frantically at the stain. "That ring cost $50,000. I leaned in close, bracing my hands on the table so I was eye level with him. "I know," I whispered. "I have the receipt." I straightened up, grabbed my purse, and looked at Evelyn. Her mouth was hanging open like a fish. "Goodbye, Evelyn," I said. "Good luck with his heart surgery bills next month." "Oh, wait. You did not know I paid for the last one, did you?" I turned and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked rhythmically on the floor, a countdown to his destruction. Keisha Marcus screamed after me, his voice cracking. "Where are you going? You come back here. You pay for this." I paused at the door and looked back. The waiter was approaching the table with the check, a black leather folder that looked like a judgment sentence. I knew for a fact that Marcus did not carry a wallet. He never did. He liked the power move of having me slip him his credit card before dinner so he could pretend to pay. But tonight, that credit card, which was actually a supplementary card on my account, was in my purse. And I had just locked it via the app on my phone 3 seconds ago. "I figured you could handle it," I called back to him. "After all, you are on a whole different level than me." I pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool Chicago night air. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. I hailed a taxi, not an Uber, because I didn't want him tracking me. "Take me to the Four Seasons," I told the driver. As the car pulled away, my phone started buzzing. Marcus, Evelyn, Marcus again. I declined them all. Then a text message notification popped up. I assumed it was another insult from my soon-to-be ex-husband, but it wasn't. It was from David, Marcus' best friend, the corporate attorney for his company, the man who sat right next to him tonight and watched the whole thing happen. The message was short. "I have the files you need regarding the Phoenix Project fraud. Meet me tomorrow. It is time you burned him down for good." I stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my face. Marcus thought I was nothing. He was about to find out that I was the architect of his entire reality, and I had just decided to pull the pin. The lobby of the Four Seasons was a cathedral of silence and marble, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise I had just left behind at the steakhouse. I walked in with my head held high, though I knew I looked like a wreck. My hair was windblown from the wait for the taxi, and my hands were still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of throwing that ring into the wine glass. I approached the front desk where a polished young woman looked up with a practiced smile that faltered for just a fraction of a second as she took in my appearance. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She saw a woman alone late at night without luggage, and she was about to tell me they were fully booked. I did not give her the chance. Before she could speak, I reached into my purse and pulled out the one thing Marcus had never seen. It was a card made of black titanium, heavy and cold to the touch. The American Express Centurion card. The invite-only black card that you cannot apply for the kind that requires you to spend and pay off at least $250,000 a year just to be considered. I slid it across the marble counter with 2 fingers. The sound it made was distinct, a solid metallic clink that echoed louder than any shout. The receptionist looked down at the card and then back up at me, her eyes widening. The polite dismissal vanished from her face, replaced by immediate deference. "We have the presidential suite available, Ms. Vance," she said, typing rapidly. "Would you like champagne sent up?" "Just water," I said softly. "And please ensure I am not disturbed." 10 minutes later, I was standing in a room that cost more per night than the monthly mortgage on the penthouse Marcus was so proud of. I kicked off my heels and walked onto the balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights blurred as I finally let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. I was free. But freedom, I was quickly learning, was noisy. My phone, which I had placed on the glass table, began to vibrate violently. It was Marcus. I watched the screen light up with his face, a photo I had taken of him laughing on a boat 2 years ago, back when I still thought his arrogance was just confidence. I let it ring. He called again immediately. And again. On the 4th attempt I picked up, not because I wanted to hear his voice, but because I needed to hear the panic. "You selfish witch," Marcus screamed the moment the line connected. His voice was high and tight, stripped of all its usual smooth baritone. "You locked the card. You actually locked the card." I held the phone away from my ear, looking at the city below as I swirled a glass of water. I did not say a word. I just listened to the background noise. I could hear the clatter of silverware, the murmur of the restaurant, and the hushed, frantic whispers of his colleagues. "The waiter is standing right here," Keisha Marcus hissed, his voice dropping to a furious whisper. "The bill is $3,000. The card was declined. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Everyone is watching. Fix it. Fix it right now." I took a slow sip of water. The coolness of it felt like a balm on my throat. "I cannot fix it, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and detached. "That card is under my name. You are just an authorized user. And since I am nowhere near your level, as you so eloquently put it, I figured you would not want to rely on my financial support anymore." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, followed by a sound that gave me more satisfaction than I cared to admit. It was the sound of desperation. "Keisha, please," he stammered, the anger bleeding into fear. "My boss is sitting right there. He is looking at me. I told them I was treating everyone. I cannot pay this. I do not have my wallet. I know I said, you never carry a wallet because you think it ruins the line of your suit. You prefer to let your wife handle the messy details like paying. Well, the wife has resigned." I could hear his mother Evelyn in the background. Her voice was shrill and panicky. "What do you mean declined? Try it again. It must be the machine." "Mom, stop!" Marcus snapped at her, his voice cracking. "It is not the machine." She cut me off. Then came the sound I had been waiting for. The sound of absolute social collapse. "Sir," a deep voice said in the background, presumably the restaurant manager. If you cannot provide a valid form of payment, we will have to involve the police. This is a significant bill. Marcus sounded like he was choking. Mom, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, give me your purse. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. Evelyn in her fake pearls and rented designer gown, having to dig through her cluttered handbag to find her credit card. The card with the $2,000 limit that I had paid off for her last Christmas because she had maxed it out on bingo and infomercial jewelry. She was about to pay for the $600 wine her son had spilled all over himself. No, Evelyn shrieked. I need that for my rent. Marcus, do something. I hung up. I did not need to hear the rest. The image of the golden boy and his doting mother arguing over who would cover the bill in front of the entire marketing department was enough to keep me warm for a decade. I turned off my phone, tossing it onto the plush duvet of the king-sized bed. I stripped off the dress I had worn to the dinner, the fabric still holding the faint scent of the steakhouse, and stepped into the shower. The hot water washed away the tension, the pretense, and the exhaustion of living a double life. For years I had played the role of the supportive, slightly dim-witted wife. I had dimmed my light so he could shine. I had built a fortress of lies to protect his fragile ego, and tonight I had set a match to it. When I stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a thick white robe, the room was dark. I felt a strange sense of vertigo. I had destroyed my marriage, humiliated my husband, and walked away from the life I had known. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a surge of power. I picked up my phone to check the time. It was past midnight. There were 47 missed calls from Marcus, 12 from Evelyn, and one text message from a number I did not have saved, but I recognized immediately. It was from David, Marcus' best friend, the godfather of our non-existent children, the corporate attorney who had sat across from me at dinner tonight, silent and watchful, while his best friend tore me apart. I had always thought David despised me. He was cold, analytical, and fiercely loyal to the company. I assumed he saw me the way Marcus did, as a deadweight. I opened the message expecting a lecture, expecting him to tell me to go back and apologize. Instead, the words on the screen made my breath catch in my throat. I have been waiting for you to leave him for 2 years, the message read. He just embezzled funds from the Orion project to pay for his gambling debts. I have the ledger. I have the emails. Meet me tomorrow at 9 at the cafe on Wacker Drive. Do not bring a lawyer. You won't need one. I have the proof. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The Orion project. It was the massive infrastructure deal that had gotten Marcus his promotion. He had told me he secured it through brilliant negotiation. If David was telling the truth, Marcus hadn't just been arrogant. He had been criminal. And David, the man I thought was his staunchest ally, was handing me the weapon to finish him off. I walked to the window and looked out at the city again. The lights below looked like stars, and for the first time I realized I wasn't just a spectator. I was the one holding the sky. I typed a single word in reply. Done. I set the phone down. The game had changed. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a demolition. And I was the one controlling the wrecking ball. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite, but I was already awake and on my second cup of coffee. I sat at the mahogany desk with my phone on speaker, listening to the hold music of our private banking division. It was a tune I knew well, usually a prelude to solving a business crisis for a client. Today, I was the client, and the crisis was my husband. Good morning, Mrs. Vance. The banker's voice was smooth and professional. How can we assist you today? I need to make some changes to the authorized user settings on my primary accounts. I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Specifically, I need to suspend all access for Marcus Vance on the Platinum and the Black accounts, effective immediately. There was a brief pause, the sound of typing on the other end. Certainly. Just to confirm, this will decline any pending recurring charges as well. We show a lease payment for a luxury vehicle and a membership due for the city club pending for today. Let them decline, I said. And please flag the accounts for potential fraud if any physical attempts are made to use the cards. I hung up and leaned back in the chair. For 5 years, Marcus had walked around with his chest puffed out, bragging about his 6-figure salary and his ability to provide. He never once questioned how the math worked. He never asked how his salary, which barely covered our mortgage, and his student loans, managed to also pay for 5-star vacations, his designer wardrobe, and the 2 luxury cars in our garage. He assumed he was just that good with money. The reality was pathetic. I had set up a dummy corporation that deposited a monthly bonus into our joint account, labeling it as performance dividends. He thought his company valued him. In truth, his wife was subsidizing his entire existence. He was not a provider, he was a dependent. My phone pinged with a notification from the remote vehicle management app. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Driver's side door. I opened the app and accessed the live camera feed from the dashboard of the Range Rover parked in our driveway. I saw Marcus. He was frantically pressing the start button, his face contorted in rage. The car registered to one of my holding companies was dead. I had disabled the ignition remotely 10 minutes ago. I watched as he slammed his hands against the steering wheel. He was going to be late. He had a board meeting at 9, a meeting he needed to drive to in a $100,000 car to maintain the image of the successful executive. Instead, I watched him climb out, kick the tire, and pull out his phone to summon an Uber. A petty smile touched my lips. Welcome to the real world, Marcus. I stood up to get dressed, choosing a sharp charcoal suit that screamed business, not heartbroken wife. I was just fastening my earrings when a heavy pounding shook the heavy double doors of the suite. Keisha, open this door. Marcus' voice was muffled but furious. I know you are in there. I can see your phone location. I froze. I had forgotten to turn off the location sharing we had set up years ago for safety. I walked to the door but did not open it. I checked the peephole. Marcus was in the hallway, looking disheveled. His tie was crooked and he was sweating. The Uber ride must have been a humbling experience. Open the door or I will break it down, he shouted, not caring who heard. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. He stumbled and his eyes wild. You locked the car, he spat, advancing on me. You canceled the cards. I tried to buy coffee this morning and it was declined. Do you know how embarrassed I was? I stood my ground, crossing my arms. It is hard to spend money you do not have. Isn't it, Marcus? What are you talking about? He yelled, getting into my face. That is my money. My salary pays for everything in this life. You just manage the accounts. You are stealing from me. I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Your salary covers the electric bill and your dry cleaning, Marcus. Everything else, the house, the cars, the trips, the clothes on your back, that comes from me. I have been depositing $10,000 a month into our account for years, just to keep you from feeling inadequate. You are living on an allowance. His face went slack. For a second, the arrogance faltered, replaced by confusion. Then the rage returned, hotter than before. He raised a hand, stepping toward me with menace in his eyes. You are a liar, he hissed. You are trying to emasculate me. I will make you pay for this. Before he could take another step, a hand clamped onto his shoulder and yanked him backward with surprising force. Marcus stumbled, spinning around to see who had dared to touch him. David stood in the doorway, impeccable in his navy suit, holding a manila envelope. His face was stone. I would suggest you take a step back, Marcus, David said, his voice low and dangerous. Unless you want to add assault to your list of problems. Marcus looked between us, his mouth gaping. David, he stammered, the fight draining out of him as he faced his best friend. What are you doing here? She is crazy, man. She locked me out of my own accounts. Help me talk sense into her. David did not look at Marcus. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded. David stepped forward, placing himself physically between me and my husband. He shoved the manila envelope into Marcus' chest. I am not here as your friend, Marcus, David said. I am here as Keisha's attorney. These are temporary restraining orders and a petition for divorce. And Marcus, I highly suggest you read the section on financial disclosure before you say another word about who pays for what." Marcus looked down at the papers, then back up at David, the betrayal dawning on his face. "You are sleeping with her," Marcus accused, his voice shaking. "That is what this is. You two are together." David adjusted his cuffs, his expression one of pure pity. "No, Marcus, I just know how to read a ledger. And I know that without Keisha, you are bankrupt. Now get out, or I call security and have you removed as a trespasser." Marcus looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only hatred and fear. He turned and walked out, clutching the divorce papers like a shield. As the door clicked shut, I looked at David. "Thank you," I said. He placed a second folder on the table. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "Wait until you see what I found in the Orion project files. He is not just broke Keisha. He is dangerous." David had barely left the suite when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the heavy double doors. I checked the peephole, expecting to see Marcus returning for round 2, or perhaps hotel security coming to ask about the shouting match. Instead, I saw a woman standing in the hallway with perfect posture, wearing a beige cashmere coat that cost more than most cars. It was Sarah. Sarah was the wife of Marcus' older brother Tyrone. She was the definition of old money, a blue-blooded New Yorker, whose family name was carved into the foundations of libraries and museums on the East Coast. Marcus worshipped the ground she walked on because she represented the level of status he desperately wanted to achieve. I opened the door, bracing myself. I assumed she was here to deliver a lecture on family duty appearances and the impropriety of causing a scene at a steakhouse. "I am not in the mood for a sermon." "Sarah," I said, keeping my hand on the doorframe to block her entry, "if you are here to tell me to go back to him for the sake of the family image, you can save your breath." Sarah looked at me, her ice blue eyes unreadable. She didn't say a word. She simply pushed past me, walking into the suite with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. She threw her limited edition Birkin bag onto the velvet sofa and let out a long, unladylike groan. "God, I need a drink," she said, walking straight to the minibar. "Do you have anything stronger than sparkling water in this place?" I stood by the door, stunned. This was not the Sarah I knew. The Sarah I knew was composed, distant, and usually looked at me with what I thought was polite indifference. She popped open a small bottle of vodka and poured it into a crystal glass without ice. She took a sip, then turned to face me, a small, sharp smile playing on her lips. "You did good tonight, Keisha," she said. "I have wanted to throw a drink in that man face for 5 years. Watching you drown his ego in Cabernet was the highlight of my decade." I closed the door and walked into the room, confusion warring with caution. "I thought you liked Marcus," I said. "You always let him sit next to you at Thanksgiving. You laugh at his jokes." Sarah rolled her eyes. "I tolerate him because my husband is too weak to cut off his toxic little brother. I play the part, just like you have been playing the part. But the difference is, I know exactly what kind of monster Marcus is." She reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the glass surface until it stopped right in front of me. "I did not come here to lecture you," Sarah said, her voice turning hard. "I came here to arm you." I picked up the folder. It was heavy. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a series of grainy photographs. They showed Marcus. He was sitting at a cafe table, leaning close to a woman I did not recognize. She was young, maybe 22, with blonde extensions and a look of adoration on her face. "Who is this?" I asked, my stomach churning. "Her name is Tiffany," Sarah said, taking another sip of vodka. "She is a bottle service girl at that club Marcus pretends he is too sophisticated to go to. But that is not why I hired a private investigator 6 months ago." She walked over and tapped a photo of Marcus laughing with his hand on the girl's knee. I hired the PI because at my birthday party last spring, your husband cornered my little sister in the hallway. My sister is 19, Keisha. He tried to get her to meet him for drinks. He told her his marriage was basically a business arrangement and that he was lonely. I felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus had always been a flirt, but I never thought he would cross a line like that, especially not with family. He hit on Claire, I whispered. He did. Sarah confirmed, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. And when I confronted him, he gaslighted me. He told me I was crazy, that I was imagining things. He said I was just a uptight heiress who did not understand how affectionate families are. That was the day I decided to destroy him. But I needed proof. She gestured to the folder in my hands. Keep looking, it gets worse. I flipped the page. There were bank statements. Not from our joint account, but from a hidden account under a shell company name I vaguely recognized. I saw transfers, huge ones. $3,000 for rent at an apartment complex in the Loop. $5,000 for a shopping spree at Gucci. A receipt for a Van Cleef necklace that cost more than my car. He is keeping her, Sarah said, her voice dripping with disgust. He pays her rent. He pays her tuition. He bought her a purebred French bulldog last month. And do you want to know the best part? Look at the source of funds for that shell account. I looked closer at the transfer logs. The money was coming from a consulting fee paid out by one of my holding companies. I felt the room spin. I had authorized those payments. Marcus had told me they were for a vendor who handled our SEO marketing. I had been signing the checks that paid for his mistress to live in luxury while he told me I was not on his level. I paid for her, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of horror and fury. I paid for all of it. You did, Sarah said. You have been funding his affair, his lifestyle, and his ego. He thinks you are stupid, Keisha. He laughs about it. The investigator caught him on tape bragging to Tiffany about how his wife is a cash cow who does not know how to read a balance sheet. I stood up and walked to the balcony door, needing air. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete that it almost felt physical. I had built him up. I had covered for him. I had loved him. And the whole time he was using my money to play big shot with a girl young enough to be his student. Sarah walked up behind me. I am not done, she said softly. There is one more thing. It is about Evelyn. I turned around. His mother. The woman who had spent years making passive-aggressive comments about my hair, my background, and my worthiness. What about her, I asked. She is not just a shopaholic, Sarah said. She is in debt, deep debt. She owes $50,000 to a loan shark in Chinatown. She has been gambling, Keisha, slots, poker, anything she can bet on. Marcus knows. He has been trying to pay it off using the money he steals from you, but the interest is eating him alive. That is why he is so desperate for that promotion. He is terrified they are going to break his legs, or worse, break his mother's legs. I stared at her, the pieces finally falling into place. The desperation, the erratic behavior, the constant need for more money despite his high salary. It wasn't just arrogance, it was panic. The golden boy and the matriarch were drowning, and they had been using me as their life raft while trying to push my head underwater. Sarah poured herself another drink and held the bottle out to me. I am tired of being the white ATM for this family, she said, her voice weary. They look at me and see a checkbook. They look at you and see a servant. We are the only two people keeping this house of cards from collapsing. I took the bottle from her and poured a glass. I looked at this woman, this symbol of everything Marcus wanted to be, and realized she was just as trapped as I was. We were both hostages to the fragile egos of mediocre men. So what do we do? I asked. Sarah clinked her glass against mine, a sharp, clear sound that signaled the beginning of a war. We stop paying, she said, and we watch them burn. But first we need to make sure they can never come after us. My lawyers are good, Keisha, but David tells me you are the real mastermind behind the finances. I took a sip of the vodka. It burned going down, fueling the fire that had started in the restaurant. I am, I said. Then let us combine forces, Sarah said. You have the brains, I have the social influence. Evelyn cares about her reputation more than her life. If we expose her debt to the church board and the garden club, she will be finished. And Marcus? Well, David seems to have a plan for him. I looked at the folder on the table, the evidence of my humiliation staring back at me. Let us do it, I said. But I want to be the one who tells Evelyn. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine, warm smile. Oh, honey, she said. I would not miss that for the world. The text message from Evelyn arrived at noon the next day. It was not a request, it was a summons. Family emergency. Be at the penthouse in 1 hour. We need to discuss your behavior. I stared at the screen and felt a cold amusement. She thought she was calling a wayward child home for a scolding. She had no idea she was inviting the executioner to the chopping block. I agreed to come, but I did not go alone. I hired 2 off-duty police officers as private security. They were large, silent men in dark suits who looked like they could stop a tank. When we arrived at the building, the doorman who I had tipped generously for years tipped his hat to me and opened the elevator without asking questions. Walking into the penthouse felt like stepping onto a stage. The living room was set up for a tribunal. Evelyn sat on the velvet armchair I had bought her for Mother's Day, clutching a handkerchief. Marcus stood behind her, arms crossed, looking smug. His brother Tyrone was there too, looking uncomfortable near the window. Sarah was absent, presumably because she refused to be part of their delusion. When I walked in, flanked by my security detail, the room went quiet. Marcus sneered. You brought bodyguards, he scoffed. Who do you think you are? A celebrity. You are just a cheating wife, Keisha. Evelyn let out a theatrical sob. She dabbed at dry eyes. I never thought I would see the day, she wailed. Running off in the middle of the night with his best friend. David, of all people. We know everything, Keisha. Marcus told us how you have been seducing David for months, how you plotted to humiliate my son because you were jealous of his success. I stood in the center of the room and said nothing. I just let them talk. Marcus stepped forward, emboldened by his mother's performance. He slapped a stack of papers onto the coffee table. We are willing to be generous, he said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. If you sign the penthouse over to me completely today, right now, I will not press charges for the emotional distress you caused. I will let you walk away with your dignity. Consider it atonement for your betrayal. He held out a pen. He actually thought this was going to work. He thought he could gaslight me out of a $3 million property. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the massive 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace. It was connected to the smart home system I had installed. I picked up the remote control from the side table. You want to talk about betrayal? I said, my voice calm. Let us watch a movie instead. Before Marcus could lunge for the remote, one of my bodyguards stepped in his path. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It was security footage, high definition and crystal clear. It showed the interior of the Hermes boutique on Michigan Avenue. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. Marcus was there. He was standing at the counter with his arm around Tiffany, the girl from Sarah's photos. He was nuzzling her neck while the sales associate wrapped a bright orange box. I want the Birkin. Marcus' voice came through the speakers loud and clear. My girl deserves the best. My wife would not know style if it hit her in the face. The room went dead silent. On screen, Marcus handed over a credit card. The camera zoomed in. It was a platinum card. My platinum card. Evelyn stopped crying. Tyrone looked at the floor. Marcus turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. I paused the video right on his face as he signed the receipt. That bag cost $12,000, I said. You bought it for a bottle service girl using the credit card I pay off every month. And now you want me to sign over the house to you as atonement. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh because the absurdity was delicious. Marcus started to stammer. That is fake. That is deep fake technology. I dropped the remote and pulled a folded document from my purse. Save it, Marcus. And about this penthouse you want so badly. You can have it. Or rather, you can have what is left of it. I tossed the paper onto the coffee table next to his ridiculous transfer agreement. This is a foreclosure notice, I said. I stopped paying the mortgage 3 months ago. The bank owns it now. This entire lifestyle was funded by my cash flow, and I turned off the tap. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises before the sheriff arrives to lock the doors. Evelyn stood up, her face twisting in horror. You cannot do this, she shrieked. This is my home. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at the woman who had called me a failure, a disappointment, and a mule. I suggest you ask Tiffany, I said. Maybe she has room in her apartment, assuming Marcus paid her rent this month. I turned to my security team. We are done here, I said. As I walked to the elevator, I heard the sound of Evelyn screaming at Marcus. It was music to my ears. I didn't look back. I had an empire to run, and I had just taken out the trash. Monday morning at the headquarters of Verified Global felt less like a fresh start and more like a funeral procession for Marcus. He had spent the last 48 hours sleeping on the leather couch in his executive office because he had nowhere else to go. His mother was staying in a budget motel near the airport, and his mistress Tiffany had stopped answering his calls the moment the credit card declined at the club. The Phoenix Project was his lifeboat. It was a massive urban development deal worth $200 million. If he landed this, the bonus alone would be enough to clear his gambling debts, get Evelyn out of the motel, and maybe even hire a lawyer aggressive enough to fight me. He walked into the boardroom wearing the same suit from Friday, freshly pressed by the office dry cleaning service, trying to project an air of confidence he absolutely did not feel. The boardroom was a shark tank. The CEO, Mr. Sterling, sat at the head of the table. He was a man who didn't tolerate failure and had been watching Marcus closely since the rumors of his financial instability started circulating. Next to him was David, the corporate attorney, looking calm and predatory. And on the massive screen at the far end of the room there was a single black square. No video feed, no profile picture, just a generic user ID that read KM Consulting. Sterling cleared his throat and gestured to the screen. Before you begin, Marcus, I want to introduce our external auditor. Given the scale of the Phoenix Project and the recent irregularities in the Orion budget, the board decided we needed a third-party review. This is a senior strategic consultant who specializes in forensic auditing. They prefer to remain anonymous to ensure objectivity. Marcus scoffed, adjusting his tie. An anonymous auditor? This is ridiculous. I have been with this company for 10 years. My numbers are solid. I do not need a babysitter hiding behind a blank screen. Just present the proposal, Marcus Sterling said, his voice dropping a few degrees. If your numbers are solid, you have nothing to worry about. Marcus launched into his pitch. To his credit, he was a good performer. He walked around the room pointing at charts and graphs that predicted astronomical returns. He used all the right buzzwords: synergy, scalability, market penetration. He painted a picture of a project that couldn't fail. He smiled at the board members, making eye contact, using his charisma to gloss over the fact that his financial projections were based on hope and creative accounting. He was in his element. He thought he had them. He finished with a flourish, leaning against the table with a smug grin. So as you can see, gentlemen, the Phoenix Project is not just an investment, it is a legacy. Any questions? The room was silent for a moment. Then the speakers crackled to life. The voice that came out was digitized, distorted by a modulator to sound metallic and genderless, but the sharpness of the tone was unmistakable. Turn to page 42 of the financial addendum, the voice commanded. Marcus blinked, thrown off rhythm. He shuffled his papers. Page 42, yes. The acquisition costs, standard market rates. The voice cut him off. Incorrect. You have listed the land acquisition cost at $15 million. However, public records show that the land was purchased by a holding company called Orion Shell 3 weeks ago for $10 million. Who owns Orion Shell, Marcus? Marcus froze. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. That is just a placeholder entity for the transaction. It is standard practice to shield the company from liability. The voice on the screen laughed. It was a cold, mechanical sound. Standard practice is to protect the company, not to skim $5 million off the top. I have the incorporation documents for Orion Shell right here. It was registered in the Cayman Islands 4 days before you submitted this budget. The signatory is you. The board members gasped. Sterling sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. That is a lie, Marcus shouted, his composure cracking. This consultant doesn't know what they are talking about. These are complex international dealings. You cannot just pull up public records and think you understand the nuance. The nuance, the voice mocked. Let us talk about nuance. Let us look at the projected revenue streams. You have based your entire profit margin on a zoning permit that hasn't been approved yet. In fact, the City Planning Commission rejected the application last Tuesday. Did you think we wouldn't check? Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Who are you? He yelled at the black screen. Show your face. You are hiding in the dark, throwing accusations because you are too cowardly to face me. I built this project from the ground up. I know every inch of it. You know how to spend money? Marcus, not how to make it. The voice replied, calm and relentless. You have inflated the contractor budget by 20%. You have double-billed the marketing expenses. And you have used the project deposit to pay off a personal line of credit at the Sapphire Casino. The room erupted. David, sitting quietly until now, slid a file folder toward Mr. Sterling. The CEO opened it, his face turning red as he looked at the bank transfers. Marcus Sterling said, his voice deadly quiet. Is this true? Did you move company funds to a casino? Marcus looked around the room, panic rising in his chest. He was cornered. He had no script for this. He had no wife to whisper the answers in his ear or fix the spreadsheets while he slept. This is a setup, Marcus screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. This is personal. Whoever is behind that screen has a vendetta against me. They are trying to ruin me. It is probably my ex-wife. She is crazy. She is trying to sabotage my career. The voice on the speaker didn't hesitate. Your career was sabotaged the moment you thought you were the smartest person in the room. This audit is over. The recommendation is immediate termination and a full criminal investigation. Marcus lost it. He grabbed a glass pitcher of water from the center of the table and hurled it at the screen. It shattered against the wall, sending glass and water everywhere. Shut up! He roared, his face purple with rage. You shut your mouth! I am the director of marketing. I bring in the money. You are just a voice in a box. I will find out who you are and I will destroy you. Security. Sterling barked, standing up. Get him out of here, now! 2 security guards rushed in and grabbed Marcus by the arms. He struggled, kicking and screaming obscenities as they dragged him toward the door. You cannot fire me, he yelled, his voice echoing down the hallway. I am the Phoenix Project. I am this company. As the heavy doors slammed shut, silence returned to the boardroom. The black square on the screen remained impassive. Mr. Sterling smoothed his tie and looked at the screen. Thank you for your diligence, consultant. You saved us from a disaster. The distorted voice softened just a fraction. Just doing the job, Mr. Sterling. I will send the final report within the hour. Invoice attached. The connection cut. I leaned back in my chair in the rented office across town, took off the headset and turned off the voice modulator. I looked at the live feed of the building lobby on my laptop. I watched as Marcus was thrown out onto the sidewalk, security tossing his briefcase after him. He stood there screaming at the glass doors, a man who had lost his kingdom because he never bothered to learn how the castle was built. I took a sip of my tea. The phoenix had burned, but I was rising from the ashes. The automatic revolving doors of the verified global headquarters spun rhythmically, a mesmerizing cycle of glass and steel that separated the titans of industry from the people who served them coffee. I stood in the center of the polished granite lobby wearing a bespoke cream pantsuit that had been tailored in Milan. I checked my watch, a Patek Philippe that I had bought myself to celebrate my first million. It was 8:45 in the morning. The execution was scheduled for 9. Across the vast atrium I saw him. Marcus was pacing near the security turnstiles, looking like a man who had been trying to outrun a tsunami. His suit, usually impeccable, was slightly rumpled at the shoulders, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. He was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to move funds between accounts that no longer existed, or calling contacts who had already blocked his number. He looked small. He looked desperate. And then he looked up. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I saw genuine confusion. He blinked as if he was hallucinating a ghost. Then the confusion hardened into that familiar mask of sneering arrogance, the defense mechanism of a man who knows he is drowning but refuses to stop swimming down. He shoved his phone into his pocket and marched across the lobby toward me, his shoes clicking sharply on the stone floor. He did not look like a husband approaching his wife. He looked like a security guard approaching a trespasser. "Keisha, what are you doing here?" Marcus hissed when he was close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. He looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone important was watching. "Did you follow me? Are you stalking me now?" I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I did not speak. I just watched him unravel. My silence had always unsettled him, but today it seemed to infuriate him. "Look, I know you are desperate," he continued, his voice rising slightly in pitch. "I know I cut you off. I know you are probably realizing that you cannot survive in this city without my paycheck, but coming here? To my place of business? This is a new low even for you." He stepped closer, invading my personal space, trying to use his height to intimidate me. It was a move that used to work. Today, it just made me notice that his tie was crooked. "Go home, Keisha," he spat. "We can talk about a settlement later if you agree to stop this insanity with the house. But right now, I have the most important meeting of my life. I am about to meet with the board to save the Phoenix Project. I do not have time to deal with your begging." He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my suit with a mixture of disdain and confusion, as if he could not quite figure out how I afforded it. "What is this?" he asked, gesturing at my outfit. "Are you trying to dress the part?" "It does not work, Keisha. You can put a suit on a secretary, but she is still a secretary. Is that why you are here? Did you come to apply for a job? I heard they are hiring for the janitorial staff on the night shift. That seems more your speed." He laughed, a short, cruel sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged space. "Train sa toira," he sneered, his face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. "Stay away from me. I am about to meet with the board of directors. People who actually matter. Do not embarrass me." I finally opened my mouth to speak, to tell him that the only person embarrassing him was himself, but I never got the chance. The revolving doors spun again, and a hush fell over the lobby. It was the kind of silence that only happens when true power walks into a room. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Verified Global, strode into the atrium. He was a silver-haired man with eyes like flint, and a reputation for eating executives for breakfast. He was flanked by two assistants and David, the corporate attorney, who was carrying a thick leather briefcase. Marcus straightened up instantly. He smoothed his jacket, fixed his tie, and put on his best winning smile. It was a transformation so sudden it was almost impressive. He stepped into Mr. Sterling's path, extending his hand. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice dripping with sycophancy. "Good morning, sir. I am ready for the Phoenix presentation. I have the updated figures you asked for regarding the—" Mr. Sterling did not stop. He did not slow down. He did not even blink. He walked right past Marcus as if my husband were a potted plant or a piece of furniture. He left Marcus' hand hanging in the air, grasping at nothing but empty space. Marcus froze, his smile faltering. "Sir," he tried again, turning to follow him. But Mr. Sterling was not looking at him. He was looking at me. The CEO walked straight up to where I was standing. He stopped in front of me, and the coldness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of genuine respect. He extended his hand. "Ms. Keisha Sterling," said, his voice booming through the quiet lobby. "Thank you for coming. We know how valuable your time is." I took his hand, my grip firm. "Mr. Sterling." I said, a polite smile playing on my lips. It is a pleasure. I believe we have a lot to discuss regarding the restructuring. We certainly do, Sterling agreed. He gestured toward the bank of private elevators, the ones reserved exclusively for the C-suite executives and board members, the elevators that required a biometric scan to even open. Please allow me to escort you up, Sterling said. We have prepared the executive conference room for your briefing. The board is eager to hear your assessment. He stepped aside, allowing me to precede him. I walked past Marcus, who was standing frozen in the middle of the lobby, his hands still half extended, his mouth hanging open in a perfect circle of shock. He looked like a statue of a man realizing the sky was falling. I paused just for a second as I passed him. I did not look at him. I did not acknowledge his existence. I simply adjusted the lapel of my blazer and kept walking, my heels clicking a steady rhythm of victory on the granite. David, falling in step behind Mr. Sterling, caught my eye and gave me a barely perceptible nod. A small, satisfied smirk played on his lips as he glanced back at his former best friend. As the heavy brass doors of the private elevator slid shut, cutting off the view of the lobby, the last thing I saw was Marcus turning around slowly, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror, realizing that the woman he had called a janitor was about to go up to the penthouse while he was left standing on the ground floor. The executive conference room was a fortress of glass and polished mahogany located on the 45th floor with a panoramic view of the city I now owned. I sat at the head of the table in the leather chair usually reserved for the chairman of the board. To my right sat Mr. Sterling, the CEO, who was reviewing the dossier I had prepared. To my left was David, who had laid out 3 distinct piles of evidence with surgical precision. The rest of the board members sat in hushed anticipation. They had seen the preliminary reports. They knew blood was in the water. At exactly 9 o'clock, the double doors swung open. Marcus strode in with the energy of a man who had convinced himself that the last 20 minutes in the lobby were just a hallucination. He had smoothed his hair and straightened his tie, but the sweat on his upper lip gave him away. He carried his tablet like a shield, ready to present the lies that he believed would save his career. He took 2 steps into the room, and then he froze. His eyes landed on me. For a moment, his brain simply refused to process the visual information. He looked at Mr. Sterling, then back at me, then at the security guard standing by the door. His face twisted into a snarl of righteous indignation. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Security. Why is this woman in the boardroom? Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. This is a restricted meeting. She is a trespasser. Get her out of here immediately before she leaks confidential information. He looked at Mr. Sterling, expecting the CEO to share his outrage. Instead, Sterling looked up from the file I had given him with eyes as cold as a winter freeze. Sit down, Marcus Sterling commanded. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Marcus blinked, confused. Sir, you do not understand. This is my ex-wife. She is mentally unstable. She has been stalking me. She must have slipped past the front desk. I said sit down, Sterling repeated this time, slamming his hand onto the table. This is not your ex-wife right now, Marcus. This is the senior strategic consultant from KM Ventures, the one who has been auditing your department for the last week. Marcus' legs seemed to give out. He collapsed into the nearest chair, which happened to be the one directly opposite me. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, finally realizing that the voice on the screen, the voice he had thrown a pitcher of water at, was mine. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply pressed a button on the console in front of me, and the massive screen behind me lit up. It displayed the title slide of his presentation, The Phoenix Project. Let us begin. I said, my voice steady and professional. As I mentioned in my preliminary audit, the Phoenix Project is not a development plan. It is a crime scene. Marcus tried to speak to interrupt, but David slid a piece of paper across the table toward him. It was a cease and desist order, but Marcus was too panicked to read it. I clicked to the next slide. It showed a side-by-side comparison of 2 architectural blueprints. On the left is the proposal you submitted to the board last week, I explained to the room. On the right is a proposal submitted to the company 6 months ago by a junior analyst named Sarah Jenkins. You fired Jenkins 3 weeks before you presented this idea, Marcus. You claimed her performance was substandard. Yet, looking at these blueprints, the only difference is that you changed the font and put your name on the cover page. The board members began to murmur. Marcus turned a sickly shade of green. That is coincidence, he stammered. Great minds think alike. I developed this concept in isolation. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to display a series of emails. These are emails sent from your corporate account to your personal email on the day Ms. Jenkins was terminated. I continued. The subject line is Jenkins Files. The attachments are her entire portfolio, including the Phoenix blueprints. You did not develop this, you stole it. I stood up and walked over to the whiteboard where I had drawn a complex diagram of the Project's financial structure. I picked up a marker. But theft of intellectual property is the least of your worries, I said, turning to face him. Let us discuss the financial projections. You claimed a 40% ROI based on a projected reduction in material costs. I tapped the board hard with the marker. I tried to explain this to you, Marcus. Do you remember? 2 months ago. You were complaining about the cost of steel, and I tried to show you the global market trends on my laptop. You told me to shut up and go fold your laundry because I bored you with numbers. I looked him dead in the eye. If you had listened to me, you would know that the steel tariffs you are banking on expiring were actually renewed for another 5 years. Your budget is off by $18 million. You are not projecting a profit. You are projecting a catastrophic loss that would bankrupt this division within 2 quarters. Marcus was shaking now. He looked at the board members who were glaring at him with open hostility. She is lying, he whispered, but his voice had no power. She is just trying to make me look bad. She does not know anything about finance. I walked back to the head of the table and leaned over, placing my hands flat on the mahogany surface. I know that you created a vendor account called Vandalay Industries, I said, dropping the final bomb. I know that you approved invoices to this vendor for consulting services totaling $200,000. And I know that Vandalay Industries is registered to a residential address, specifically the apartment of a woman named Tiffany. I threw a stack of bank records onto the table in front of him. They fanned out, revealing transfer after transfer. You have been embezzlement company funds to pay for your mistress lifestyle, Marcus, and you did it using the corporate approval codes that I set up for you because you could never remember your own password. Mr. Sterling stood up. His face was purple with rage. You are finished, Marcus Sterling said. You are done in this industry. You are done in this city. Marcus looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life standing on a pedestal I built only to realize he had no wings when I kicked it out from under him. I sat back down and took a sip of water. The presentation was over. The dismantling was complete. I had used the very intellect he mocked to dissect his life piece by piece, and there was nothing left but the truth. The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that usually follows a car crash. Mr. Sterling did not yell. He did not lose his temper. He simply reached out and pressed the intercom button on the table with a single decisive finger. Security to the executive conference room immediately, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. Marcus looked around wildly, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for an ally, for someone who would laugh and say this was all a misunderstanding. But the board members looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. The man who had walked in 10 minutes ago thinking he was a king was now just a liability in a cheap suit. You cannot do this, Marcus stammered, his hands gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. I have rights. I have a contract. You cannot just fire me based on the word of some outside consultant. Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. We are not firing you based on her word, Marcus. We are firing you based on the bank records, the forged invoices, and the stolen intellectual property lying on this table. You are terminated effective immediately for cause. You will surrender your company phone, your laptop, and your badge right now. The double doors opened, and 3 uniformed security guards marched in. They did not look friendly. One of them moved to Marcus' side, waiting for him to comply. David stepped forward, then sliding a thick document across the polished wood. "And this," David said, his voice calm and professional, "is a formal notice of investigation from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are also filing a civil suit for the recovery of the embezzled funds. I suggest you find a very good criminal defense attorney, Marcus. You are going to need one." The reality finally hit him. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and sickly. He looked at the security guards, then at Sterling, and finally his gaze landed on me. The arrogance was gone. The sneer was gone. In its place was a naked, pathetic terror. He realized he had no leverage, no power, and no escape. "Keisha," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Baby, please, you have to stop this. Tell them I am a good man. Tell them I just made a mistake." He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out as if to grab my arm. Security stepped in his path, blocking him, but he tried to look around them, his eyes pleading. Oi, help me," he begged, using the pet name he hadn't used in years unless he wanted something. "You are my wife. We are partners. You cannot let them do this to me. Think about us. Think about our life. I am sorry about dinner. I am sorry about everything. Just fix this. Please." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had spent 5 years making me feel small so he could feel big. I looked at the husband who had laughed while his friends mocked me. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the cool indifference of a CEO dealing with a redundant asset. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my cream trousers. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him, protected by the wall of security guards. "Wife," I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. It tasted sour. "You stood in a restaurant 4 days ago and told the world that our marriage was a joke. You told everyone I was nowhere near your level." I leaned in closer, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "You were right, Marcus. We are not on the same level. You are a thief and a fraud who is about to be escorted out of the building. And I am the majority shareholder of the consulting firm that just signed your termination order." I pulled a pen from my pocket, a gold fountain pen he had given me for Christmas years ago, because it was free with his office supply order. I picked up the termination notice lying on the table, signed my name with a flourish right next to Mr. Sterling's signature, and dropped the pen on the table. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. "I am at the level where I decide who stays and who goes," I said. "And you are gone." "Get him out of my sight," Sterling ordered. As the guards grabbed his arms and began to drag him backward, Marcus started to scream. It wasn't a scream of rage this time. It was a scream of pure despair. He shouted my name over and over again as he was hauled out the door, his heels dragging on the carpet. A broken man leaving behind a life he never deserved in the first place. I watched the doors close, cutting off his cries. I turned back to the room. Mr. Sterling nodded at me. "Shall we continue with the restructuring plan, Ms. Vance?" he asked. I sat back down at the head of the table. "Yes, let us proceed." 2 hours later, Marcus stood on the doorstep of his brother Tyrone's house in the upscale suburbs of Highland Park. He looked like a shadow of the man who had strutted into the boardroom that morning. His tie was gone, his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and he was carrying a cardboard box filled with the few personal items security had allowed him to keep. He pressed the doorbell repeatedly, his desperation overriding any sense of etiquette. He knew Tyrone was his last hope. Tyrone had always been the soft one, the peacekeeper, the brother who would lend him money without asking questions just to keep their mother happy. The door opened, but it was not Tyrone. It was Sarah. She stood in the doorway wearing a crisp white blouse and holding a glass of iced tea, looking every inch the unbothered heiress. She did not move aside to let him in. She simply leaned against the doorframe and took a sip of her drink, looking him up and down with the same cool detachment one might view a stray dog that had wandered onto the lawn. "Hello, Marcus," she said. You look terrible. Let me in, Sarah, Marcus demanded, trying to push past her. I need to talk to Tyrone. I need cash. That crazy ex-wife of mine froze everything. I need 5,000 to get a hotel and a lawyer. Sarah did not budge. She put a hand on his chest, stopping him cold. Tyrone is not here for you, she said. And neither is his wallet. We heard about what happened at the office. David called us. Embezzlement, Marcus. Really? I knew you were desperate, but I did not think you were stupid. Marcus' face twisted in anger. Get out of my way, he shouted. Tyrone! Tyrone! Get out here! Your wife is blocking me from my own family. Tyrone appeared in the hallway behind Sarah. He looked tired. For years he had lived in Marcus' shadow, listening to their mother praise Marcus' success while dismissing his own steady career as a dentist. He looked at his younger brother, and for the first time, there was no admiration in his eyes, only disappointment. You should go, Marcus. Tyrone said, his voice quiet. We cannot help you. You have to help me. Marcus pleaded, his tone shifting from aggression to begging in a heartbeat. I am your brother. Mom is staying in a motel because of Keisha. I have nowhere to go. Just write me a check. I will pay you back as soon as I sue her for wrongful termination. Sarah laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the humid afternoon air. You will pay him back, she mocked. With what money? The money you do not have, or the money you already stole from us? Marcus froze. What are you talking about? Sarah reached into the pocket of her slacks and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly, enjoying the tension. I checked Leo Trust Fund this morning, she said, referencing their 5-year-old son. I noticed the balance was lighter than it should be. $15,000 lighter to be exact. The bank traced the withdrawal to an IP address in your penthouse. You guessed Tyrone password, didn't you? It was not hard since he uses the same password for everything, which you knew. Tyrone stepped forward, pushing past Sarah until he was nose to nose with Marcus. His face, which was usually open and kind, was now dark, with a fury that had been building for a lifetime. You stole from my son Tyrone, asked, his voice trembling with rage. You stole from a 5-year-old to pay your gambling debts. Marcus held up his hands, palms out. It was a loan, he stammered, backing away. I was going to put it back after the Phoenix bonus came through. I just needed to cover a spread on the game last week. I swear, Tyrone, I would never hurt Leo. You already did hurt him, Tyrone shouted. That was for his school, that was his future, and you threw it away on a blackjack table because you are too selfish to live within your means. Mom said you would understand. Marcus tried again, playing his final card. She said family helps family. That was the wrong thing to say. Sarah stepped in. Your mother is not the matriarch of this house, Marcus. I am. And in my house we do not harbor thieves. Tyrone looked at his wife, then back at his brother. He took a deep breath, and did something he had never done in 35 years. He pulled his arm back and slapped Marcus across the face with all his strength. The sound was like a gunshot. Marcus stumbled back, tripping over his own feet and landing hard on the concrete walkway. He clutched his cheek, looking up at his brother in absolute shock. Do not ever come back here, Tyrone spat. You are not my brother anymore. You are just a criminal. If I see you on this property again, I will call the police and I will press charges for the theft. Sarah smiled, a cold, satisfied smile that mirrored the one I had worn in the boardroom. You heard him, she said. Get off our porch, and take your box of trash with you. She slammed the heavy oak door in his face. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed with finality. Marcus sat on the concrete alone, humiliated and penniless. He had lost his job, his home, his reputation, and now his last safety net. He looked at the closed door, then at his box of office supplies scattered on the grass. For the first time in his life, Marcus realized that no one was coming to save him. The golden boy had finally tarnished, and the only thing left for him was the street. I sat in my corner office watching the view count climb on the live stream. It was Evelyn. She was sitting on the edge of a bed in the budget motel I had suggested, wearing a bathrobe that had seen better days and no makeup. She held her phone with a shaky hand, tears streaming down her face in a performance that deserved an award. "My daughter-in-law has destroyed us," Evelyn wailed to the camera, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. Keisha got a little taste of money and forgot where she came from. "She threw my son out on the street just because he hit a rough patch. He lost his job and instead of standing by him, she kicked him while he was down. She thinks she is better than us now. It is classic new money arrogance. She used my son to climb the ladder, and now she is discarding him like trash." The comments section was moving so fast it was a blur. People who did not know me, people who had never met Marcus, were tearing me apart. They called me cold, heartless, and a gold digger. My business phone started ringing. My assistant, normally unflappable, looked pale as she walked in. "We are getting 1-star reviews on Google," she said quietly. "People are canceling consultations. They are saying they do not want to work with someone who abandons their family." I looked at the screen again. Evelyn was now sobbing about her heart condition, claiming the stress was going to kill her, and that I did not care if she lived or died. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was weaponizing her victimhood to destroy the one thing I valued more than my money, which was my reputation. I did not get angry. I did not type a furious rebuttal in the comments. I did not record a video crying about my side of the story. In the world of high-stakes business, you do not fight emotion with emotion. You fight it with data. I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder I had named the Ledger. It contained 5 years of banking history, scanned invoices, and email confirmations. I spent 10 minutes curating the highlights, redacting sensitive account numbers, but leaving the names and amounts crystal clear. Then I posted a single link to my social media pages and the company website with the caption, "The Cost of Loyalty." The first document was a hospital bill from 3 years ago. St. Jude Medical Center. Patient Evelyn Vance. Procedure triple bypass heart surgery. Amount paid $52,000. Paid by Keisha Vance. The second was a series of tuition payments to the state university for Marcus' younger cousin, who Evelyn insisted we had to help because family supports family. Total amount $40,000. Paid by Keisha Vance. The third was the most damaging. It was a wire transfer record to a known debt consolidation agency specifically referencing Marcus' gambling liabilities. The amount was staggering, $85,000, paid by Keisha Vance. Beneath the documents, I added a simple summary. Total financial support provided to the Vance family over 5 years, $1.5 million. I did not leave because he lost his job. I left because I was tired of paying for his mistakes while he insulted my character. I hit post. The reaction was instantaneous. The internet loves a villain, but it loves a receipt even more. The tide turned so fast it caused whiplash. The comments on Evelyn livestream shifted from sympathy to outrage. People started tagging her, asking why she was biting the hand that fed her. They asked where her son's salary went, if I was paying for her heart surgery. They asked why she was crying poverty when I had spent a fortune keeping a roof over her head. Evelyn tried to ignore the comments at first, continuing her monologue about family values. But then she saw the screenshots. I watched her face change live on camera. She squinted at the screen, her mouth dropping open, as she read the itemized list of my generosity. She turned a bright blotchy red. She stammered, trying to find a lie that would cover this, but the numbers were there in black and white. She ended the live stream abruptly, the screen going black mid-sentence. But it was too late. The video of her humiliation was already being screen recorded and shared. My business reviews started to flip. 5 stars. A woman who knows her worth. Hire her immediately. I closed my laptop. Evelyn wanted to talk about the cost of family. I just showed her the bill. 2 days after the live stream debacle, I was sitting in my office reviewing the acquisition proposals for Marcus' old company when my assistant buzzed me. She sounded amused. "There is a young woman here named Tiffany," she whispered. "She says she has something personal of yours and she wants to make a deal." I told her to send her in. I knew exactly who she was. The girl from the Hermes video. The bottle service girl who thought she had snagged a millionaire. She walked in looking less like a conqueror and more like a cornered animal. The Birkin bag was nowhere to be seen, likely sold to pay rent. She sat down across from me without being asked and slammed a gold iPhone onto my desk. "I have a video," she said, her voice trying for menace, but hitting desperation instead. "It is Marcus. He is doing things that would make you very embarrassed if they got out. It is nasty. If you do not wire me $50,000 right now, I am going to post it on every social media platform. I will tag you. I will tag his company. You will be known as the wife of a pervert." She crossed her arms, waiting for me to panic. She thought she held the nuclear codes. She thought I was the grieving wife trying to salvage her dignity. I looked at the phone, then at her. I picked up my tea and took a sip. "Is that it?" I asked. She blinked, confused by my lack of panic. "Did you not hear me?" I said, "I will ruin your reputation. You are the classy businesswoman, right? This will drag you down into the mud with him." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished wood of my desk. "Tiffany, you seem to be laboring under a massive misunderstanding. You think I am trying to save Marcus. You think I care about the sanctity of a marriage that ended the moment he used my credit card to buy your affection." I pointed at the phone. "Post it. Upload it right now. I will even give you the Wi-Fi password to make it faster." Her jaw dropped. "You are crazy," she whispered. "No, I am strategic," I replied. "My lawyers are currently drafting a divorce petition based on adultery and financial fraud. If you release that video, you provide irrefutable proof of his infidelity. You would be saving me weeks of discovery and thousands of dollars in legal fees. Go ahead. Make my day. I would actually appreciate the help." She slumped back in her chair, the fight draining out of her. She realized her leverage was non-existent. She looked down at her hands, her acrylic nails tapping nervously on her knee. "He promised me a condo," she said, her voice breaking. "He said he was buying the penthouse in the Gold Coast. He took me to see it. Then when we went to sign the papers, his card declined. He said it was a bank error. He said you froze his accounts out of spite." "He lied to you, Tiffany," I said. "He does not have any money. He never did. Every date, every gift, every promise was funded by me. He is not a millionaire. He is an unemployed, middle-aged man living in his mother's motel room. You are not his girlfriend. You are just another expense he cannot afford." Her face hardened. The sadness was replaced by a sharp, vindictive anger. "He wasted 6 months of my life," she hissed. "He told me to quit my job. He said he would take care of me. I am behind on my student loans because of him." "That is fraud," I suggested helpfully. "Romance fraud, to be specific. Promising financial security to obtain companionship, and then failing to deliver due to misrepresentation of assets. You could sue him. You could file a police report. He is already under investigation by the SEC. One more charge would not hurt. And if you testify about the gifts he bought you with stolen money, it might help you avoid being named as an accomplice in his embezzlement case." She grabbed her phone off the desk. Her eyes were cold. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," she said. "I think I will do exactly that." She walked out of my office with a new purpose. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of pity. Marcus had made enemies of the two women who might have actually cared about him. Now he had to deal with the wrath of a woman scorned who also happened to be broke and looking for a payout he could never provide. The walls were closing in on him, and I did not even have to lift a finger. Friday night, David picked me up in his vintage Jaguar. He did not tell me where we were going, just that I needed to eat something other than takeout in my office. When we pulled up to the valet stand of the Gilded Steer, my stomach tightened. It was the scene of the crime. The place where I had drowned my marriage in Cabernet just 2 weeks ago. I looked at David, questioning his sanity. He just smiled and handed the keys to the valet. "We are reclaiming the narrative, Keisha," he said. "You walked out of here a victim. Tonight you walk in as a victor." He was right. The moment we stepped through the heavy oak doors, the atmosphere was different. The maitre d' who had looked at me with pity that night now rushed forward to greet us. He ushered us not to the back corner, but to the best table in the house by the fireplace. David ordered a bottle of wine that made Marcus' selection look like grape juice. As we settled in, I realized for the first time in years I was sitting across from a man who actually saw me. Not the prop, not the bank account, me. You know I almost fired Marcus 3 years ago, David said, swirling his glass. I caught him trying to pass off your market analysis as his own. I called him into my office ready to terminate him for plagiarism, but then I saw you waiting in the lobby with a packed lunch for him. You looked so proud of him. I could not do it. I could not break your heart. I looked down at the white tablecloth, remembering that day. I had spent 6 hours on that analysis. Marcus had told me it was just a rough draft he needed help with. I always thought you hated me, I admitted. You were always so cold. I was not cold, Keisha. I was furious, David replied, his voice dropping an octave. I was furious because I was watching a woman with a genius-level intellect shrink herself to fit into the pocket of a man who could barely tie his own shoes. I respected your vows, even if Marcus did not. But I hated watching you be his safety net. You treat men like fixer-upper houses, Keisha. You see the potential and you ignore the rot in the foundation. You do not need a project, you need a partner. His words hit me harder than the wine. He was right. I had spent my entire adult life trying to build Marcus into the man I wanted him to be, instead of accepting the man he was. I reached across the table and covered David's hand with mine. It was the first time I had touched him. His skin was warm and steady. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing me. We finished dinner in a comfortable silence, the kind that does not need to be filled with idle chatter. For the first time in a decade, I did not feel the need to perform. I did not have to worry if my laugh was too loud or if my opinion was too sharp. I could just be. We walked out of the restaurant into the cool Chicago night. The wind off the lake was brisk but refreshing. David walked me to the car, his hand hovering protectively at the small of my back without actually touching me. It was a gentlemanly gesture that made my heart ache in a good way. What neither of us saw was the dark sedan parked across the street with its lights off. Inside, Marcus sat hunched over the steering wheel of a rental car he could barely afford. He held a camera with a telephoto lens, his hands shaking with excitement and malice. He snapped photo after photo. Click. Me touching David's hand. Click. David opening the car door for me. Click. The two of us laughing on the sidewalk. In his twisted mind, he had just won the lottery. He did not see two friends sharing a meal. He saw leverage. He saw a narrative of adultery that he could sell to a judge to void the prenup he had forgotten about. He lowered the camera and scrolled through the images, a sick smile spreading across his face. He thought he had caught me. He had no idea he was just documenting his own irrelevance. He put the car in gear and followed us into the night, convinced that this time he was finally the one in control. The first court hearing, blind confidence. Part 14. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that usually signaled boredom, but today smelled like victory. I sat at the plaintiff table next to David, looking impeccable in a white crepe suit that cost more than Marcus' entire legal defense fund. Across the aisle, Marcus sat hunched over next to a man who looked like he had bought his law degree from a vending machine. His name was Mr. Henderson, and his polyester suit was 2 sizes too big. It was a far cry from the high-powered legal teams Marcus was used to hiding behind, but when you have 0 assets and a pending SEC investigation, top-tier firms tend to lose your number. Marcus looked terrible. He had tried to shave but missed a spot on his jawline. His eyes were bloodshot and he kept tapping his foot, a nervous staccato rhythm that echoed in the quiet room. When the judge entered, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, with a reputation for zero tolerance regarding courtroom theatrics, Marcus straightened up, attempting to summon the ghost of his former arrogance. Mr. Henderson stood up, clearing his throat nervously. "Your Honor, my client is the victim of a calculated financial ambush," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "His wife, Ms. Vance, has systematically hidden assets throughout their marriage. We are petitioning for a full, equitable division of all marital property, including a 50% stake in KM Ventures and all associated holding companies. We estimate the value of these assets to be in the range of $20 million. I stifled a laugh. 20 million was a conservative estimate, but the audacity of asking for half of the company I built while he was busy buying bottle service was breathtaking. Marcus nodded vigorously beside his lawyer, looking at me with a smirk that said, "Got you." He truly believed that the court system existed to serve his entitlement. "And on what grounds do you justify a 50% claim on a business your client had no hand in building?" Judge Patterson asked, peering over her reading glasses. "Did Mr. Vance contribute capital? Did he provide labor?" "He provided emotional support," Mr. Henderson stammered. "And he was the primary breadwinner, which allowed Ms. Vance the freedom to pursue her hobbies, which eventually became this business." David leaned over to me and whispered, "Primary breadwinner. That is rich coming from a man whose allowance barely covered his gambling debts." Then came the moment Marcus had been waiting for. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered urgently, pointing at his briefcase. Mr. Henderson nodded and pulled out a large envelope. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that the breakdown of the marriage was caused by Ms. Vance's infidelity," he announced dramatically. "My client spiraled into financial difficulty only after discovering his wife's affair. This emotional distress directly impacted his ability to work, leading to his current unemployment. We believe this entitles him to spousal support in the amount of $20,000 a month." Marcus stood up, unable to help himself. He grabbed the photos from the envelope and waved them in the air. "She is sleeping with her lawyer," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at David. "Look at them. They were at dinner just last week, laughing while my life fell apart. That is why she destroyed me. She wanted to run off with him." He slammed the photos onto the judge bench. They were the grainy pictures he had taken from his rental car. Me touching David's hand, David opening the car door. The lighting was poor, and the angle was predatory, taken from the bushes like a stalker. Judge Patterson picked up the photos. She looked at them for a long moment, then looked at the date stamp. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dangerously low. "These photos are dated 3 days ago. Based on the filings in front of me, you and your wife separated 2 weeks ago. You had already been terminated from your position and served with foreclosure notices before this dinner took place." "It started before that." Marcus lied, his eyes wide and desperate. "They have been plotting this for years. Look at how they look at each other. That is not friendship. That is conspiracy. She cut off my money to run to him. She drove me crazy with jealousy. And that is why I made mistakes at work. It is her fault." The judge looked at the photos again, then dropped them onto her desk as if they were contaminated. "This is a picture of 2 people eating steak, Mr. Vance," she said. "It is not proof of adultery. It is proof that you are following your estranged wife around Chicago, taking photos from a car. In my courtroom, we call that stalking, not evidence." Marcus' face crumbled. He had played his ace and it turned out to be a joker. He looked at me expecting to see fear or guilt. Instead, he saw me checking my manicure. I was bored. His grand revelation was nothing more than a tantrum. "Your Honor." David stood up, buttoning his jacket. "If Mr. Vance is finished with his slideshow, we would like to present a piece of evidence that actually matters. A document that makes his request for 50% of my client's assets not only baseless but legally impossible." Marcus frowned, confusion clouding his features. He didn't know what David was talking about. He had forgotten the past because he was too busy trying to rewrite the present. But the past keeps receipts. David reached into his leather briefcase, but he did not pull out a tablet or a sleek new file. He pulled out a single document protected by a plastic sleeve. The paper inside looked slightly yellowed with age, a physical relic from a decade ago. He walked up to the bench and placed it gently in front of Judge Patterson, then handed a copy to Mr. Henderson. "Your Honor." David said, his voice projecting clearly across the courtroom. "While Mr. Vance is busy fabricating stories about adultery to justify spousal support, we would like to submit Exhibit A. This is a prenuptial agreement signed and notarized 10 years ago, 2 weeks before the couple married." I watched Marcus' face. It went blank. Then a flicker of memory sparked in his eyes. 10 years ago, Marcus had received a small inheritance from his grandmother. $50,000. To him, it was a fortune. To me, it was rent money. He was so terrified that I, the broke college graduate, was going to marry him for his 50 grand that he dragged me to a legal clinic. He forced me to sign a prenup to protect his precious nest egg. He called it being prudent. I called it insulting, but I signed it because I loved him, and I didn't care about his money. I remembered sitting in that cheap office listening to Marcus dictate terms. He wanted to make sure that if we ever split, I couldn't touch a dime of what he made. He thought he was destined to be a billionaire, and he didn't want me riding his coattails. David adjusted his tie and looked at Marcus with a shark-like grin. "Mr. Henderson, if you will, turn to page 4, clause 4b, David said. It states clearly that any and all assets acquired by either party during the course of the marriage shall remain the sole and separate property of the acquiring party. It explicitly waives all rights to community property or equitable distribution." The courtroom was silent. Mr. Henderson grabbed the document. He read it. His shoulders slumped. He looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who realized he was never getting paid. "You signed this," Marcus hissed at his lawyer. "You told me we could get half." Mr. Henderson glared at him. "You never told me there was a prenup, you idiot." "This document is ironclad. It waives everything. You insisted on this language. Look at your initials right here next to the clause about separate business entities." Marcus grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He stared at his own signature. He stared at the clause he had insisted on, the clause he wrote to keep me away from his future wealth. Judge Patterson cleared her throat. She looked at the document, then at Marcus. "Mr. Vance, did you sign this agreement of your own free will?" Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded dumbly. "Then the terms are clear," the judge said, slamming her gavel. "This petition for division of assets is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff, Ms. Vance, retains sole ownership of KM Ventures and all associated assets as per the binding prenuptial agreement. Mr. Vance, you are entitled to keep whatever assets are in your own name, which according to these filings appears to be nothing." I stood up. I walked over to the defense table. Marcus was staring at the table, looking like he had been punched in the gut. "You wanted to protect your $50,000, Marcus," I whispered. "You were so afraid I was a gold digger that you dug a moat around yourself. Well, congratulations. You are safe. You kept your 50 grand. But you locked yourself out of my empire. You played yourself." He looked up at me, and I saw the realization hit him. He had spent 10 years thinking he was the prize. He had spent 10 years protecting a pile of dirt while I was building a gold mine right next to him. And because of his own greed and arrogance, he didn't get a single nugget. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. David held the door for me. Behind us, Marcus put his head in his hands and started to cry. It was the sound of a man who realized he had held the winning lottery ticket and used it to light a cheap cigar. Evelyn always said that reputation was currency, but she failed to realize that currency can be devalued overnight. 2 days after the court ruling stripped her son of any claim to my fortune, Evelyn tried to play her last card. She went to the First Baptist Church for the Wednesday evening social. This was her turf. For 30 years she had held court there, judging other women for their shoes or their parenting while pretending to be a pillar of the community. She walked in wearing a hat I had bought her, expecting to rally the troops against her evil daughter-in-law. She expected prayers and casseroles. Instead, she walked into a wall of ice. The church ladies had seen the receipts. The bank statements I posted online had circulated through the congregation faster than gospel. They saw the $50,000 for her heart surgery. They saw the debts I cleared. They saw the lies she told about me abandoning her when I was actually bankrooting her survival. Mrs. Gable, the head of the fundraising committee, stopped Evelyn at the door. She did not raise her voice. She simply handed Evelyn a box containing her personal items from the church office. "We do not associate with liars, Evelyn," she said loud enough for the choir to hear. "You testified falsely against the woman who saved your life. There is no place for that kind of wickedness here." Evelyn was shunned. The social exile was swift and absolute. With Marcus broke and her reputation in tatters, she had nowhere left to turn but the source she had spent years poisoning. She came to my new house. It was a sprawling, modern estate in the hills, gated and secure, far away from the penthouse the bank had reclaimed. I watched her on the security monitors in my home office. She looked older than she had a week ago. Her posture was slumped and her clothes were unpressed. She threw herself against the iron gate, sobbing and screaming my name. She wailed about being destitute, about sleeping in her car, about how she was an old woman who deserved respect. It was a pitiful performance, but I knew better than to buy a ticket. I had bought enough tickets to the Evelyn show. I did not go down to the gate. I did not speak to her over the intercom. I pressed a button on my desk phone and summoned my personal assistant. Her name was Chloe, a sharp young woman who handled logistics with the precision of a surgeon. "Chloe, go down there," I said calmly. "Do not let her inside. Do not let her touch you. Just give her the envelope." I watched on the screen as Chloe walked down the long driveway. Evelyn stopped screaming when she saw someone approaching. She straightened her coat, wiping her face, hoping to see me, hoping for a reconciliation scene she could manipulate. When she saw it was a stranger, her face fell. Chloe did not open the gate. She simply slid a thick manila envelope through the bars. Evelyn stared at it, then looked up at Chloe, confused. "Ms. Vance will not be seeing you," Chloe said. Her voice filtered through the security audio system. "She will not be speaking with you again. However, she has authorized a one-time humanitarian grant." Evelyn tore open the envelope. Her hands shook as she pulled out a glossy brochure. It was not a check. It was a pamphlet for Shady Oaks, a budget-assisted living facility 2 towns over. It was clean and safe, but it was miles away from the luxury retirement she had felt entitled to. Inside the brochure was a letter. Chloe recited the terms I had dictated. "Ms. Vance has paid for 3 months of room and board at Shady Oaks. This includes 3 meals a day and basic medical monitoring. The payment is non-refundable and non-transferable. If you check out, the money does not go with you." Evelyn stared at the picture of the modest shared rooms on the pamphlet. "This is a nursing home," she screeched. "I am not an invalid. I need cash. I need a house." "This is the offer," Chloe said, cutting her off. 3 months. That gives you 90 days to find a job, apply for government assistance, or find another relative to sponge off of. After 90 days, the account closes and you are on your own. Take it or leave it. Evelyn looked at the gate, then at the camera lens, knowing I was watching. She threw the brochure on the ground and spat at the bars. "I will not go to a poor house," she yelled. Chloe turned around and started walking back to the house. "Then enjoy your car," Chloe called back over her shoulder. I watched Evelyn stand there for a long time. The bluster faded. The rage turned into fear. She looked at her empty car. She looked at the darkening sky. Then slowly, painfully, she bent down and picked up the brochure. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. It was a ruthless boundary, yes, but it was also the first time in her life she had been forced to face the reality of her own choices. I turned off the monitor. Charity was done. The launch of the Artemis Initiative was meant to be the crowning achievement of my career. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was transformed into a sleek, futuristic gallery filled with industry titans, venture capitalists, and media outlets from around the globe. I stood center stage, bathed in a spotlight that felt like a warm embrace, wearing a crimson power suit that signaled I had arrived. The presentation was going perfectly. The live stream counter on the monitor facing me showed 3 million viewers tuning in. I was in the middle of explaining our revenue model when a commotion at the back of the room shattered the atmosphere. Glass broke, people screamed. The heavy double doors, which were guarded by security, swung open with a violence that shook the walls. Marcus stumbled into the room. He looked nothing like the polished executive he had once pretended to be. His clothes were dirty, his hair was matted, and his eyes were wide with a manic, desperate energy that sent a chill down my spine. He had bypassed the metal detectors somehow, probably through a service entrance he remembered from his days trying to network here. In his hand, glinting under the stage lights, was a serrated kitchen knife. You stole it all from me, Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. He pointed the knife at me, his hand shaking uncontrollably. You took my life, Keisha. You took my money, you took my reputation, and now you are standing there like a queen while I rot. The room froze. Security started to move in from the sides, but Marcus was close to the stage. He vaulted onto the platform with a surprising burst of adrenaline. I stood my ground. I refused to run from him. I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. I did not take anything, Marcus. I said, my voice amplified by the microphone steady and calm. You lost it. Put the knife down before you do something you cannot come back from. He laughed, a broken, unhinged sound. I am already gone, Keisha. I have nothing left to lose except you. He lunged. It happened in slow motion. I saw the madness in his eyes. I saw the blade arc through the air aimed at my chest. I braced myself for the impact, but it never came. A blur of movement flashed from the front row. David. David intercepted him mid-stride. He didn't think about his safety. He didn't hesitate. He threw his body between the knife and me, tackling Marcus to the floor. They crashed down in a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric. There was a grunt of pain, a sickening sound of tearing cloth, and then a splash of bright red blood on the white stage floor. David rolled away, clutching his upper arm. The knife clattered across the stage, sliding to a stop near my feet. Marcus tried to scramble after it, but by then the security team was on him. 3 guards slammed him into the floor, pinning his face against the very stage he had tried to conquer. I dropped to my knees beside David. His sleeve was soaked in blood, but he was conscious, his teeth gritted in pain. I am okay, he gasped, squeezing my hand with his uninjured arm. Just a scratch, Keisha. Is he secured? I looked up. Marcus was being handcuffed, his face pressed into the carpet. He was breathing hard, spitting curses. And then he looked up. Directly ahead of him, projected on the massive screen behind the stage, was the live stream feed. It was still running. 3 million people had just watched Marcus Vance try to murder his ex-wife. They saw his disheveled state. They saw the knife. They saw the cowardice. The police arrived within minutes. They hauled Marcus to his feet. He looked at the screen, seeing himself broadcast to the world in high definition. The realization of what he had done finally penetrated his delusion. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This wasn't a civil matter. You are under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and aggravated burglary, the officer recited as they dragged him away. Marcus looked back at me one last time. There was no plea for help this time. No arrogance. Just the hollow, empty look of a man who realized he had just signed his own life sentence. He had wanted to make a scene. He had wanted the world to see me fall. Instead, he had given the world a front-row seat to his own self-destruction. As the doors closed behind him, I looked at David, who was being attended to by paramedics. I realized then that Marcus hadn't just lost his freedom. He had lost the last thing he had left, which was the ability to hurt me. The nightmare was finally over. The metal door slid shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. The air in the visitation room tasted like stale sanitizer and despair. It was a sharp contrast to the crisp autumn air outside where I had left my driver waiting. I sat on the hard plastic stool on my side of the plexiglass divider and waited. When the guard brought Marcus in, I almost did not recognize him. The man who had once spent 40 minutes styling his hair before a dinner reservation was gone. In his place was a gaunt figure in a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His skin was sallow, and his eyes darted around the room with a nervous, frantic energy that made me pity him. He sat down and picked up the receiver. His hands were shaking. I picked up mine. Keisha. He breathed, his voice cracking. You came. I knew you would come. You still care. I know you do. You have to get me out of here. This place is hell. I do not belong here with these people. I watched him silently. Even now in prison, he thought he was better than everyone else around him. It was not my fault, Keisha. He continued, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I was under so much pressure. You have to understand. My mother put so much pressure on me to be successful. She raised me to believe I deserve the best of everything, but she never taught me how to earn it. She crippled me, Keisha. She made me this way. He paused, waiting for me to comfort him. When I remained silent, he shifted tactics, blaming the world. And the corporate culture at Verified Global, he spat. It was toxic. They forced me to cut corners. They expected impossible results. If I had not fudged the numbers on the Orion project, they would have fired me anyway. I was a victim of a corrupt system. I did what anyone would have done to survive. I did it for us. I wanted to give you the life you deserved. I almost laughed. He was still rewriting history, still trying to frame his greed as nobility. He was crying now, big wet tears that tracked through the stubble on his cheeks. "Please, Keisha," he sobbed. "Talk to David, drop the charges, tell them it was a misunderstanding. I cannot do 10 years. I will die in here." "I am sorry about the knife," I snapped. "It was just the stress. I am a good man. I am your husband." I leaned forward, pressing my hand against the cold glass. I looked deep into his eyes, searching for a shred of the man I thought I had married. I found nothing but a reflection of his own ego. "Stop talking, Marcus," I said softly. My voice was calm, steady, and completely devoid of the warmth he was seeking. He fell silent, his chest heaving with sobs. "You are not in here because of your mother," I said. "You are not in here because of corporate pressure or society or bad luck. You had every opportunity. You had a wife who supported you, a job that paid well, and friends who trusted you. You threw it all away because it was never enough." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You did not fail because of circumstances, Marcus. You failed because you are a small man who always needed to stand on someone else's neck to feel tall. You needed me to be weak so you could feel strong. You needed your friends to be impressed so you could feel valid. You needed a mistress to feel desirable. Your entire life was a performance, and now the curtain has fallen." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. The truth seemed to physically strike him, shrinking him even further into his seat. "I did not come here to save you," I continued. "I came here to see for myself that the ghost that has been haunting my life is finally gone. And he is. The man I loved never existed. He was just a costume you wore to spend my money." I stood up. I smoothed my skirt and placed the receiver back on the hook. "Keisha, wait!" he screamed through the glass. Though I could not hear him anymore, I could see him mouthing the words, "Do not leave me." I looked at him one last time. I felt a profound sense of lightness. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only space. Space for my future. Space for my empire. Space for a life that was real. "Goodbye, stranger," I said to the glass. I turned my back on him and walked toward the exit. I did not look back as the guard moved to restrain him. I walked out into the sunlight where David was waiting for me by the car. He saw my face and he knew. It was done. We were free. 6 months after the trial, the ink dried on the most aggressive acquisition deal in Chicago history. Verified Global, the titan that had once seemed invincible, was hemorrhaging money in the wake of the Phoenix scandal and the SEC investigation. Their stock price had tanked, and investors were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. That was when KM Ventures swooped in. We didn't just buy them. We absorbed them. I sat at the head of the boardroom table again, but this time I wasn't a consultant. I was the chairwoman of the board. The name on the building was changing, and so was the culture. I looked around the room at the department heads who had been summoned for the transition meeting. Among them were 3 familiar faces. The men who had sat at the table at the Gilded Steer that night. The ones who had chuckled into their napkins when Marcus called me a joke. The ones who had toasted to his arrogance. They were sweating now, their eyes fixed on the mahogany table, unable to meet my gaze. They knew who I was. They knew what they had done. And they knew that in my world, loyalty wasn't just a word, it was a currency they didn't have. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I remember our last dinner together quite vividly. You seemed very entertained by my husband's assessment of my capabilities. You laughed, you nodded, you enabled a culture of mediocrity and misogyny that almost destroyed this company. One of them, a VP named Greg, tried to speak. Ms. Vance, we didn't know. We were just going along to get along. I silenced him with a raised hand. That is exactly the problem, Greg. Leaders don't go along. Leaders stand up. You watched a man humiliate his wife and steal from his company and you applauded. That kind of judgment is not welcome in my empire. Your severance packages are with HR. Security will escort you out. I watched them leave, their heads hung low, stripped of their titles and their pride. It was a necessary purge. A garden cannot grow if you don't pull the weeds. But destruction is easy. Creation is harder. I turned my attention to the rest of the staff, the quiet ones in the back, who had been doing the heavy lifting, while men like Marcus and Greg took the credit. I called forward Sarah Jenkins, the junior analyst Marcus had fired for having the audacity to be brilliant. I had rehired her immediately after the audit. Sarah, I said, you designed the original Phoenix framework. You understand the vision better than anyone. You are the new director of development. She looked stunned, tears shining in her eyes. Thank you, Ms. Vance. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I replied. Then came the final piece of the puzzle, the financial bedrock of the new company. I needed someone I could trust implicitly, someone who knew the value of $1 and the cost of betrayal, someone who had walked through the fire with me. I would like to introduce your new chief financial officer, I announced, gesturing to the door. Sarah, my sister-in-law, walked in. She looked radiant. Gone was the weary woman who felt like a walking checkbook for her husband's family. In her place was a shark in a Chanel suit. She carried a tablet and an air of absolute command. She had divorced Tyrone shortly after the intervention, realizing that enabling his passivity was just as toxic as Marcus' aggression. She had taken her family fortune and her sharp financial mind and joined me. Hello, everyone. Sarah said, her smile sharp and bright. Let's look at the numbers. We have a lot of waste to cut and a lot of profit to make. I watched her take her seat at my right hand. The two women who had been dismissed as a prop and an ATM were now running the show. We exchanged a look. It wasn't just a look of friendship, it was a look of power. We had taken the wreckage of our personal lives and built a fortress. The empire wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The wind at 50 stories up feels different than it does on the ground. It is cleaner. It is sharper. I stood on the terrace of my new penthouse, watching the Chicago skyline glitter like a jewelry box that I had personally unlocked. This was not the apartment Marcus had tried to steal. This was the one I bought with the profits from the acquisition. It was twice the size and infinitely more peaceful. I held a glass of champagne, but I was not drinking it to drown my sorrows. I was drinking it to taste the victory. Behind me, the glass door slid open. I did not turn around because I knew the cadence of those footsteps. It was David. In a traditional story, this would be the moment the hero gets down on one knee. He would pull out a velvet box and ask me to be his wife to complete his life. But David knew better. He knew that I did not need completing. He stepped up beside me, placing a leather-bound portfolio on the limestone railing. It was not a ring. It was a prospectus. I have the projections for the European expansion, David said, his voice low and steady, matching the hum of the city below. The London office is ready. Paris is waiting for your signature. And I found a way to structure the tax liability that will save us 15% in the first quarter. I looked at the document, then up at him. His eyes were clear-focused and filled with an intensity that had nothing to do with dependency and everything to do with ambition. He was not offering me a fairy tale ending where we ride off into the sunset and I fade into the background. He was offering me the world, and he was offering to help me carry it. Is this your proposal? I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. It is a partnership, David corrected. 50-50. Equal equity, equal control. No silent partners. No hidden ledgers. Just us building something that will outlast us both. I ran my hand over the leather cover. It felt solid. It felt real. For so long I had convinced myself that love meant making myself smaller so someone else could feel big. I thought being a good wife meant fixing broken men and pretending their failures were just bad luck. I thought I needed a husband to validate my existence, to prove that I was worthy of love and stability. I looked at David, who was waiting for my answer, not with anxiety, but with the quiet confidence of a man who knows his own value and recognizes mine. I realized then that I did not need a husband to complete me. I was already whole. I was an industry. I was a force of nature. I did not need a savior. I needed a co-pilot. I needed someone who could fly at my altitude without getting vertigo. I accept, I said. David smiled. It was not the smug grin of a conqueror. It was the proud smile of a teammate. Good, he said. Now there is one last piece of business to attend to. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a fountain pen. He did not hand me the portfolio. He pointed to the documents sitting on the patio table. They were the final divorce decree. Marcus had signed them in prison, desperate to sever ties and hoping for mercy that was not coming. Now they just needed my signature to make it official. I walked over to the table. I did not hesitate. I did not feel a pang of regret or a wave of nostalgia. I uncapped the pen. The ink flowed smoothly black and permanent. I signed my name Keisha Vance. It was not just a signature. It was a declaration of independence. I set the pen down. It is done, I said. David poured himself a glass of champagne and clinked it against mine. To new beginnings, he said. I looked out at the city one last time. The light seemed brighter now. The path forward was clear. To the empire, I whispered. And as I took a sip, I knew that the best part of my life was not the ending of the old chapter. It was the fact that for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the pen. This journey taught me that true love never requires you to dim your light just so someone else can shine. For years I confused support with self-betrayal, thinking I had to hide my strength to protect my husband's fragile ego. But I realized that your value is not a negotiation. Real power comes from financial independence and the courage to walk away from anyone who treats you like an option. You are not a stepping stone for someone else's success. You are the architect of your own empire. Never give the pen to someone else when you should be writing your own story. If you are ready to stop shrinking and start building your own empire, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of unapologetic female power.